Begin by just recapping last week's victory against North Carolina. Certainly pleased with the victory. A lot of things that we'll have to improve on against, obviously, an excellent Florida State football team. But, you know, a lot to take from that game. I think we can teach a lot off of a victory, and a lot of the things that went on in that game are areas that I think our football team can improve on. So I think that's probably the best thing as a coach, that you can win a football game and know that there's things that can be improved upon. There's areas that we can do better as coaches. We can coach better. We certainly can play better, but we can also improve during the week of our preparation for Florida State. So great to get a win, but also great to be able to build off of that, which we think we will. Segueing into Florida State, obviously 22 straight games, Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, but it's not just the quarterback. This is a deep football team. Offensive line, I think, is where I would start. One of the best offensive lines I've seen in some time. I remember going against them 3 years ago. It was a freshman-laden, young offensive line, extremely talented. Now it's a veteran group. So I think that's probably, you know, what really stands out to me. Outstanding wide receivers, you know, great skill, you know, whether you're talking about either receiver, you know, Green, vertical depth, vertical play is the thing that concerns you about them. They can go and get the football. O'Leary at the tight end position, depth at the running back, you know, just a well-balanced offense across the board. Defensively, athletic, physical, great corner play, I think led by Darby, outstanding player, great speed, great make-up speed, can play the ball. Again, that's why they're, you know, the defending national champions. Playing at their place will be a great challenge. It's the first time on the road for us, so we'll have to play in that kind of environment. But I will tell you that we're excited about the opportunity to go down and play Florida State. Our guys are looking forward to it, and you know, we'll have a great week of preparation and be looking forward to playing Florida State. So, with that, we'll open up to questions.
Brian, on Sunday you mentioned the desire to play these cup games to be relevant. I believe Notre Dame, since 1998, has one win against a top 5 team. How important is it to get where you want to go to win these type of games?
I think they're very important. You know, I don't know how many times since I've been here, other than playing Alabama. Is that the only time? Who else?
Stanford.
Stanford.
Yeah.
You know, that's how you're measured as a program. You know, when you're talking top 5 teams. You know, those are the games you want to win, certainly. But, you know, I think before I got here, I don't know that we had a top 25 win. So, you know, we're moving up the ladder and certainly want to get to that point where we're talking about, you know, beating top 5 teams.
Is there any particular you think it has to happen for that to happen? I mean, does it take, do you have to get a win like this to kind of build the confidence, or what do you think it takes to make the next step?
No, I don't think so. I think you just, you know, you gradually build your program to the point where, you know, you're beating, you know, again, as when we first started here, we didn't have a top 25 win in a number of years. Then you beat top 25 teams, then you beat top 15 teams. Then, you know, you get yourself in it consistently, and then, you know, you break through and you start playing at that caliber. So I think it's just a process and a journey that we're on as a program. And you know, we expect to beat Florida State. And so I don't think you go down there thinking that you can play average. You got to play your very best to beat the very best in the country.
And just thoughts on what would it mean if you'd lose this game? And just, do you think this would knock you out of the playoff picture or be hard to come back from? Or
no, I think we still have a rugged schedule in front of us. So I don't look at this as a game that, you know, ends our quest for being, you know, in the playoffs. It's an important game for us, but no, I don't think that our kids look at it as a, you know, make or break kind of scenario.
And DeVaris Daniels tweeted this morning that he's done. Wonder if you comment on that, if you have any finality on exactly what was said?
I have not seen that tweet.
Okay. Do you have any news on any of the 4 remaining players?
The only 2 players that I know of that have spoken to me are Kavari and Ishak. And both of them will not be with us this year.
Do you hope Ishak, is there hope that Ishak will return? Like Kavari mentioned, he hoped to be back in June.
He would like to be back as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I guess I'm up next. Brian, when you went down to the, I know, umbrella, when you went to the national championship game against Alabama, you felt like your team was pretty prepared for that, and in retrospect, you said this stage was a little bit different. And what did you learn from that experience, and do you feel like this game is somewhat the equivalent of that kind of stage?
No, I don't think it's the same. I think it will be an environment that our kids will have to certainly get used to. We'll prepare them and talk a lot more about it this week. I won't leave it up to, hey, we're at Notre Dame and we play in these kinds of environments. So we've already brought it up. We've already talked about it. We will spend more time on preparing them for the environment that they're going to be in. It will be a huge game. It's a national televised game. The crowd will be intense, but I don't think it has the same kind of routine leading up to it like a national championship game.
You faced Andrew Luck before. Winston's numbers through 19 starts are kind of similar. How do you defend a guy like that without giving away the playbook? But I mean, what do you try to do against a guy that's that accomplished, and does the Andrew Luck experience help you?
Yeah, I think anytime you're playing a quarterback that is so efficient, and that's really what stands out here is his efficiency, not turning the football over, minimizing any of the mistakes that they make. I think you have to look at yourself the same way. I mean, not giving up big plays is important for us, and not forcing us, in a situation where, we make that big mistake. They're waiting for you to make a mistake. And I think that's where they've shown themselves to be very, very good. And Winston in particular, he's waiting for you to make a mistake. We have to be on top of our game. And if we do that, we think that we've got enough that we can make some plays as well. But he's just so efficient. He's going to make plays. You can't let your guard down against him. Any player, he'll beat you.
How did the MRI come out with Austin Collins?
It was delayed until this afternoon. He had a conflict with some academics.
Okay. And again, you haven't practiced yet, but I'm sure you've had meetings. How do you feel like the psyche of your defensive players are? I don't think they felt like they were invincible, but there was a roll of momentum through the first 5 games, and then they hit the speed bump. How do you feel like they've responded to that speed bump?
Oh, I think anytime you get, into a game like that, you look at certain areas and say, well, you know what? I'm not maybe I'm not as accomplished in this area, and I need to get better. So I think in certain areas it's a good thing. We broke down the game. Certainly we feel like offensively we didn't put our defense in a very good situation at times. We think as coaches we didn't put our defense in a very good situation at times, and we take some accountability for that as well. And I think our players feel like they needed to make some plays that they didn't make. So there's a little bit to go around for everybody in this matter. So I think bottom line is our players still are confident in their ability, but I think it was a nice way for them to be reminded that there's still a lot more work to be done.
Last one from me. Now that we're getting close to finality with the players, with the suspended players, is there any inkling, has anybody talked to you about the concept of vacating victories still being in play?
Nobody has.
And do you believe that it's out of play, or do you believe?
No, it hasn't been addressed to me in a formal setting, and talked about as, here's the next step, here's what we're going to do. I haven't had that meeting with Jack Swarbrick about what is the next step, if there is a next step. We haven't had any concrete conversations about whether there is a next step. We haven't simply talked about it.
Brian, Eric made the correlation to the Alabama game. I was thinking more in terms of Oklahoma 2012, and I realize that's stuff that we focus on and write about, you don't think a lot about, but you see more of a correlation to this trip to Florida State with Oklahoma.
I do. I do. I think that that's a similar environment that we'll go into, and we're preparing in that vein.
And I mean, how do you apply that? There are a few guys that experience that. How
Sure,
do you
there's
use
quite a
that?
few actually
Yeah.
that have experienced it. Well, I mean, look, first of all, we haven't been on grass since we were slipping down in New York on the ice, so we'll have to get on the grass as soon as we can. The conditions aren't great today, but we need to get on grass and get used to that. We'll certainly need to work on nonverbal cadence for the first time this year. And so those are things that need to be addressed and worked on. There's no question about that.
Do you see this as a team that's better? Well, I mean, you did a good job 2 years ago at Oklahoma. I mean, do you see this as a team that's even better prepared for a moment like this than the one was 2 years ago?
This group does not, strike me as one where they're going to go down to Florida State and be affected by the crowd. Our problems have been self-inflicted. So I'm more concerned about our self-inflicted wounds than I am what may happen because of the environment. They're a pretty focused group on what they need to do. We just need to make sure that, we don't make the mistakes we've made over the last few weeks.
When you evaluate the pass protection, especially since you reconfigured the offensive line, when you've had breakdowns, is it a breakdown with the protection of the offensive line? Is it Everett not getting them in the right protection, or is it Everett leaving the pocket too soon? It's probably a combination of all three, but how do you weigh those factors?
Well, you've answered your own question. It's all of those. And so when we're talking about, an offensive line, you're also talking about the trust that comes with the quarterback working, within the depth and the width of the pocket. Sometimes not taking away the solid depth of the pocket by stepping up when you don't need to, or if the width is protected, not leaving, the pocket, or not communicating when we need to be in a particular protection, that happened. So it's a little bit of all those things, and all of them are correctable. All of them have been coached, that we'll have to continue to coach with all of our guys. Here's the good part. All of the guys are committed to seeing it and getting better at it. And I think it starts with Everett. He sees it, and yesterday he's working on it already. His attitude is awesome, and he understands how important it is for him to be better in the pocket, and that's a really good thing.
I don't know how much Torrey Hunter played on Saturday. Did he have a setback, or you just want to stay with Fuller because he was that?
God, it was hard to get him out. We probably should have played him a little bit more, but Will was just had a hot hand out there, and we didn't want to pull him out of the game.
Yeah. And could you explain the technical reasons? I think you've taken Riggs and made him the nickel and inserted Butler at corner, flip-flopping their responsibilities. Is that accurate?
We did on this particular game, but Matthias will be back at the nickel position.
And then what is your kick return philosophy? There was one instance where Cam McDaniel was coming to tell Amir Carlisle to stay in the end zone. Carlisle brought it out, so he was a blocker short because Daniel was playing traffic.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a fine line between the confidence of that unit and wanting to make a play and then what has been communicated to the players relative to the depth with which the ball has been kicked. I have no problem if that unit comes to me and says, Coach, take the green off. Green's a call for the depth of how deep that ball has been kicked, which means we cannot take it out. If they convince me to take that off because they're so confident in their ability, then go ahead and do that. But when I have that on and they still go through and do it on their own, then we have a problem in communication. That's what happened on Saturday. A guy wanting to make a play, and so that can't happen.
So what's the depth, or does that vary based
It
upon
varies
opponent?
depending on who the kicker is and what the circumstances are in the game.
Thank you.
Yep.
Coach, just a big picture on how do you frame it mentally with a game like this in terms of, is this just another game, or is this the kind of game you come to Notre Dame to play? You know, how do you frame it with the guys going into it mentally?
Yeah. Well, I think what we try to do is stay on course all year for all of our games and not to try to get too high or too low. I think that I've done a pretty good job of setting that as the standard, which keeps us within reasonable amounts of up or down, reasonable amounts. What we don't want are high spikes of emotion and low spikes. They know that this is a game that everybody has been looking forward to. I try to keep that at a minimum one way or the other. So we don't do a lot of talking about hyping the game. We talk more about it's still going to be about your preparation. It's still going to be about how you play the game and how you execute. But I think we're all kidding ourselves if they don't know that there's a little bit more here because it's, you know, two undefeated teams playing, on the road and a primetime game. They know that. But we try to keep it to a minimum because we have so many other games that we have to play.
And with your corners and the secondary, how do you walk that fine line of, okay, you can't make mistakes against Winston, but, you know, you have to have that courage to take a guy one-on-one sometimes? And
You're right. I mean, that's where you are. You know, you have to mix up some coverages. You have to give your corner some help, certainly sometimes, but you can't be double zoning or they're going to run the ball all day at will with that offensive line. And then there are times that you have to be out there and you have to play tight coverage. So it's a balance. That's why they're difficult. That's why they've won 22 games in a row. But you can't be one-dimensional. You have to be able to do both.
Brian, you know, you're here now in mid-October still answering questions and getting resolution on the suspended players, and yet here you are at 6-0. How has this team been able to handle the uncertainty of that and still get to this point, you know, still undefeated and still all their goals still in front of them?
Well, I just think that we've handled it with the right amount of respect and the right amount of understanding that we all have to attend to our own business. You know, we miss our teammates, we care for them, but yet we have our own lives that we have to move on, and our guys clearly understood that, and they're here to get a degree and play football for Notre Dame. So I think we balanced that out as a group. We have very good leaders that were able to continue to move that message forward through the group, and I was really proud of the way they've handled it. You know, the easiest thing would be for them to be out on social media taking a side. They've stayed away from doing that. And they've handled themselves with great maturity in a very difficult situation. So I think it's been really the way we've handled it internally that has allowed them to stay focused on, you know, themselves and their teammates and you know, doing their job on a day-to-day basis.
In terms of the actual impact at the positions of the players who you lost? Has it been surprising or as expected that the players who stepped up in their place have performed to the level they have?
Well, I think we've seen great development from Cole Luke. Here's a young man that arguably, we didn't know about Cody, certainly a transfer in, whether he was going to be a starter or a nickel. But Cole Luke has obviously done a great job. He's been developing and turning himself into a really fine corner for us. So that development has been outstanding. Will Fuller obviously has emerged, as a go-to wide receiver, from that standpoint. So if you look at, the two guys in that respect have really stood out for us on offense and defense.
And finally, in your experience, how unusual is it to be playing your first road game on October 18th? And do the neutral site trips help at all in preparing for that experience?
I think so. I think, playing, in two NFL venues, there is a kind of glamour and big-time atmosphere associated with those sites. So, we weren't playing in a small little stadium. We were playing in an environment that kind of evokes that kind of feel that we'll get in a similar fashion at Florida State.
Brian, to your right, second row. You've lost 3 safeties now with Collinsworth, Hardy, and Barati. Any contingency plans there other than obviously Farley is moving to back up there?
Drew Tranquil and Matthias Farley. That will be the 4-man rotation.
Is anyone else on the roster available for that? If you're not looking for another injury, but you don't want to go down to 3 safeties, obviously, because they both have roles in different packages of your defense.
Well, those would be the 4, right? So those would be the 4 safeties. We don't have anybody else at this point.
And you mentioned Riggs on the last question. This would be his 5th game preparing for Florida State, if not playing against them. Has that been of any aid in terms of tendencies for him to talk to the defensive backs or the staff?
I don't know. I saw him coming in this morning. So we were coming in this morning. It was dark out, and I didn't know who it was coming in when we were coming in. And then as I got to the door, I saw it was Cody. I said, Cody, we're playing Florida State. Those guys are big and they're strong. They're really fast. Are you scared? He goes, Coach, I've played him the last 4 years, so I'm not really scared. So he said he wasn't scared. So I think he's all right.
And just kind of a technical question, Golson's had success the last few games escaping up the middle, whether designed or scrambling, and then Williams obviously did. He's a bit of a different quarterback, but obviously did last week. What's the challenge for defense, and what usually breaks down when that vacates in the middle for a running quarterback?
Those were designed for us. They were matching one of our interceptions. They were matching hard to our spread sets, which gave us the ability to run him inside. So anytime he's scrambling, inside out, those are generally designed runs for us.
I guess defensively, what's the challenge? At
times we were spying Williams, and he's just, he beat our spy on a couple of occasions. So, when you have an outstanding guy in there, it's hard for defensive tackles to maintain, that pocket, awareness when that guy's back there. The athletes at the quarterback position are difficult to keep in there, and Winston is one of those as well. Yeah.
Brian, down in front, just one quick clarification on Echak and Kavari. To your knowledge, are they able to stay in school for the semester?
No.
This semester? Not referring to spring, but the fall?
No, they're not.
Okay, thank you.
You had mentioned earlier in the year when you played Purdue, you had to match their intensity. You're playing a much higher level opponent, and their intensity might be ratcheted up, maybe from perception-wise, because of all that swirling around them with the Jameis controversies and other things. Do you feel you have to take the same us against the world mentality that they might have, or do you try to tone that down as well?
No, I think the development of this football team has lots to do with education, learning, teaching them. There's so much teaching going on with this group. It's really fun, to be quite honest with you. There's so much to teach and for them to learn that really doesn't come into play. There are experiences in games, and because they prepare pretty darn good. I mean, they're a focus group in their preparation. But there are things they can do better during the week, and we can point them out. Like, there are a number of things that we'll do this week differently in our preparation that are a result of what happened during the game. And so that's the fun part. So we don't really need to get into, the psyche with this group, really. We have to do better at the execution, playing in the game, and how we prepare. So that's really how we focus week to week. We don't have to really worry about all of the, the mind games, if you will, with this group, which is pretty good.
You talked about both Cole Luke and Will Fuller emerging in place of players who have not been able to practice. Isaac Rochelle in place of Ishaq Williams. Mm-hmm. Where do you see his role in the future? It's like he's so stout there at holding up that end position. Do you see him moving inside in the future, or do you like him just in that role where he's at the strong side end position?
Well, we love where he is because of what he can do in holding the point in our defense. And he can move inside as a pass rusher on third down. And that's what he's really doing. So I think he can do both for us, to answer your question. I think on first and second down, he can be an outstanding defender for us on the edge of our defense. And I think on third down, he can move inside and be a guy that can really push the depth of the pocket for us. And I think he's getting to that point for us.
Has he almost been as much a surprise as Luke and Fuller?
We had a glimpse of him in the spring, and his physical ability in terms of his strength was on display. We knew how strong he was. We knew his numbers in the weight room, and we knew how that was starting to translate itself. If you had asked me that he was going to have the kind of year, I would not have been as surprised because we saw it coming.
You said it was his lower body that really needed the strength.
That's correct. And we saw that coming, and those numbers were skyrocketing. And that's why I'm not as surprised, because those were starting to show themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah. Coach, over to your left. Do you have any recollection of the 1993 Notre Dame Florida State game and what memories you might have of that game?
I do not. I have zero recollection of that game. I'm sorry.
Since being here, have you seen highlights of it at all, or?
No. I don't think I've seen one highlight of that. Was it a good game?
It was. Yeah.
It was?
Yeah.
Did we win?
Notre Dame won, yes.
Okay, I like the game already.
They were number one. Notre Dame was number two. It was here. And
it was here?
31-24, Notre Dame won.
I like that.
Yeah.
Let's have a repeat of that one. Let's do another one.
That game was played on grass, too. I don't know if you did.
Was it on grass?
It was, yeah.
Okay. Was it snowing?
I don't believe it was.
Okay. Well,
I don't think it'll be snowing this Saturday either.
No,
I'll check with our weather.
It's going to be 80 and
yeah.
sunny.
You got at this with Al a little bit about, and we've heard you say a lot this year about you don't want you guys to rise to the level of your opponents, and
yeah.
You talk about the spikes and highs. And I suppose the obvious danger to getting too high this week would be a low, but aside from that, wouldn't it be a good thing for the guys to get a little bit more up than normal this week if there's any way to coax them into playing higher than they already have?
Yeah, I'd like them to play smarter, more locked in, more aware of their surroundings, attention to detail, fundamentals. Those are really the things. Our guys are excited to play. They love competition. They love the battle. They love playing the game. It's a great group. We're a little sloppy. We really need to focus on those things. It's a different group of guys each year, and this group loves to play. They sometimes forget what they got to bring with them to play the game clean and play it with an attention to detail in all areas. And we knew that. I mean, look, I knew there were going to be some times where, you know, some of our inexperience would show itself, and it did on Saturday, but we're prepared for it, and we're not going to lower our standards because of that, and we're not going to use it for an excuse. We want to get better because of it, and I think we will this week. And I'm very confident that we'll play really good football because of what we experienced this past Saturday.
Right ahead here. I know you've said before you're not really big on time of possession, but you are 26-2 here when winning the time of possession battle. Is this one of those games where it's important to control the football a little bit and keep it out of Winston's hands as much as possible?
Oh, there's no question that in these kinds of games where you have two really good football teams and there is not a big margin for error, there's a lot of factors that I look at in these kinds of games. You have to have a running game. The run game has to be part of it. Obviously, turnovers are huge. You know, starting field position. There are some keys that are part of our, you know, game plan and what we have to accomplish in this game. Time of possession. Certainly you want to minimize the snaps that Winston gets, but it's not one of the top ones for me. It's still, for me, about an effective running game and minimizing the turnovers.
Another thing that when you first got here, you talked about was the ability to win close games, and those first couple of teams struggled with that. Now you've shown a proclivity for being able to do that. What turned that around for you?
Winning the first close game, and then believing that that's what we're going to do. We'll find ways to win, and then it builds on itself. And then they have an expectation that they're going to win. There was nobody that didn't believe that they were going to win the last couple of games. I mean, there was no sense or feeling on the sideline at any time that we weren't going to win those games. And that takes time. You have to win games to get to that. But I think that starts with winning that first one.
Coach Fisher yesterday was very adamant in his support of Jameis Winston for all the things that he's gone through. Considering what you and the program have gone through this year, can you empathize with him a little bit?
Well, you know, you're players, right? And you're with them, you know them, and he obviously knows him better than anybody else. So I think I come from that perspective, that he knows his quarterback better than anybody else. So I take it from that perspective more than anything else.
Coach, down here in front, kind of to play off that, you guys obviously jumped in front, sat the guys down when they had hearings coming up. Is it frustrating not just because you're playing Florida State, but is it frustrating as a college football coach to know that Winston is still playing given kind of what he's facing both in this autograph deal and possibly with the sexual assault case?
No. I really, you know, I've got so much to worry about in my own program. I can't even fathom to think about other people's issues. I've got to handle what I handle. So that is so far from my radar that I have to really focus on my group. There's enough here for me, trust me, every day. So I really don't even get into those kinds of scenarios, thinking about what other programs should be thinking about and how they should do their job.
You guys will obviously prepare for Jameis, but is there any extra preparation for if he doesn't play to you guys? Because obviously they kind of play a different style if he's not in there.
Well, we're preparing for their system. Yeah, and so their system, Jimbo's system is, we know it. And so we've got a pretty good idea of what that system's going to be. And we're pretty sure that Winston's going to be the quarterback.
And then finally from me, you mentioned Johnny Williams a lot during the preseason, but we haven't seen him. At this point, is it probably more of a redshirt situation for him?
We'd like it to be. We'd like it to be. We're hopeful that ends up being the case, yes.
Brian, given the youth of the secondary, last week's game was kind of unique in that you saw a lot of different things. You saw a wildcat, give it back to the quarterback and throw. You saw a halfback option. And for the young guys in the secondary, and not that they needed a lesson from a team like North Carolina, but they saw an awful lot in one afternoon that, might have taken them 3 or 4 games, maybe another half season to see that much in one game.
You're absolutely right. There was a lot going on there. First quarter was not good. We didn't play with the same kind of, focus, energy, use whatever word you want. Second quarter, they weren't on the field that much. Third quarter, we really settled back into playing the kind of football defensively that we had been playing. We really gave up 3 points. The other one was a turnover on our part, and they threw the quick quarterback option pass, which was tough to defend, to go to your question. They brought the tight end across, and Butler took 2 steps with him, and then the quarterback came out in a nice play. Having said that, the fourth quarter, those young guys played pretty good. They got tired. So there was a lot going on out there, but the nice part about it is that we saw from the young players, the young defensive players in the back end, we saw with Redfield and with Butler in particular, we saw some progress.
With a week off following this game, is there any thoughts as you get into the game plan, play this guy more downs or that guy more downs because you got a week off, or does the week off have anything to do with it at all?
Well, we're going to get them out of here. We're going to look at Navy on Monday and Tuesday, and then we're getting them out of here. We stayed the first bye week here. We did not let them leave with the express purpose to get them out of here on this second bye. So we'll get a good look at Navy on Monday and Tuesday, and then they're out of here, and they have to report back on Saturday.
Let's see if we have any questions from the callers.
Well, Pete's got one right here.
Just real quick.
Pete, I don't think he's ever liked you, really. I mean, to be honest with you.
Yeah. The screen game has probably not been a real staple for you guys the last 4 years. This year, it's been a big part of what you do, and you've done it successfully. What do you think's been the biggest key to that being more a part of your offense?
The Screen Association threatened to take my card away. That's all I did when I was at Cincinnati, and when I got here, they were going to take it away from me, so we had to get it going again. So that's really we needed it part of our offense, and it was definitely missing as an ingredient within our offensive structure. So it was something that we recommitted to in the spring, really spent a lot of time with it and getting it going, and I think it's given us 4 touchdowns at this point. So I think it was just an important element that was missing within our offense that I felt like it needed to be reintroduced back into the offense.
Did your personnel have a lot to do with that, or was that just more your decision, we need to focus on this, we're doing it?
Personnel. The screen game requires, the quarterback has to have a real comfort level with it, somebody that has the ability to release it at different arm angles. Everett's really good at it. It requires that as well. So that has something to do with it as well.
Just lastly, you talked about the offensive line a little bit on Sunday, but just in terms of their run blocking on Saturday, was that their best performance of the season, you thought, or?
It was their most, probably their most consistent in terms of run blocking. We missed a couple of calls. We're out of position on a couple of things. Nick is still feeling his way through on a couple of areas. Ronnie Stanley was outstanding, graded out the highest. Matt does some pretty good things in the run game. Once in a while in protections he gets overextended, and Elmer is really starting to settle in at that guard position. So, we feel like we're getting there. We had a combination of things in some pass protection that were quarterback related, running back related, and communication related that we got to get better at. But in answering your question, it was probably our best.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, now we will go to the callers, see if we have any questions.
All righty.
We do not have any questions over the phone.
All right, that works great. Thanks, everybody.